All right, Roger Martin here for Billings, Montana. Good day. And this is part of Glenn Beck's reporting. And he does an excellent job when he really starts to get into things. So we said vote, 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 all this stuff at the beginning. Vote, vote, get out and vote. Yeah, great. But the problem is the deep state, the shadow state, the elites have been trying to overthrow our government for a long, long time.
Has anything changed? Since we were little kids, we learn America is special, and it is. We do hold the power here, not some dictator or tyrannical murderer. We have the say.
Privilege to select.
But in all fairness, we haven't gotten after the criminal elites and the shadow governments or the deep state, and we're starting to see how deep these things are. Yet the white hats and the people that are trying to bring justice back legally and politically, they're having one hell of a time because of how pervasive and overshadowing this government is. That's illegal and outstepped its bounds legally and politically and morally.
The man I want in each office. Hope that in some way my vote can affect the future.
Or do we? Does our vote even really matter? Because elected officials have come and they have gone. Surely as water will wet us and fire will burn, no matter who's elected. Look, global unrest, chaos, terror, and slaughter.
Now, to be a little more just, the world's in great, great upheaval. Look at the stuff going on in Hong Kong, Middle East, Europe, Africa, China, South America. It is in unrest, but people are fighting for their rights, trying to do everything in their power to control and get a handle on the governmental abuses everywhere.
Always return. Our founders never intended for this to be the way our country is run. But the radicals and the progressives slowly began chipping away at that firewall. Bit by bit, they went underground into the bowels of the chasmic bureaucracy that they helped create. I don't know if we'd ever really realize how real this deep state was if it wasn't for Ukraine. We've uncovered the people, the organizations, the government programs that has been built to operate completely outside of official channels.
Now, that's one of the most powerful and correct statements ever stated. This bureaucracy, this shadow state, this deep government, whatever you want to call it, these elite groups, have tried and have successfully run things outside of legal and political channels for a long, long time. At least 75 to probably 100 years. And Ukraine is just the tip of the iceberg. Believe me.
And hidden from you. It's beyond them not caring what you want. They don't care what the person you voted for even wants.
If it wasn't for Trump and the White Hats and the other things, this began a long time before Trump was elected. This started to form when Clinton got in and started doing all the crap that he did. Out of Arkansas. It accelerated during Obama's eras and Bush eras, but especially during Obama's time. And the military especially got hammered, and they wanted to find a man whom they could trust and build on. And when President Trump started talking about the birthing issue of Obama, they had found their man. And they started grooming and pushing him to be president. But all the stuff that he's brought out, both parties have fought him hard, especially the Democrats. And the Republicans have been soft, too soft, on legalities and treason and abuses in Congress and in the Senate, and especially in the Supreme Court and the judicial system, including the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and other governments, especially the media abuses, CIA elites that have tried to control the media and the propaganda. It has been more than abusive. It's been criminal.
And this country, this world, it has to stay on fire for them to see it through. The world is being molded into their ideological fantasy. When the president shined a light on Ukraine, it uncovered one of the shadow government's biggest success stories.
One. This is just one. And it's a lot deeper and more pervasive than we currently know. This should be coming out in December and next year, and we should see a greater picture of this, but it is deep, pervasive, and criminal to the hilt.
But here's the problem. The shadow government overstepped. And through the impeachment inquiry, they're slowly being unmasked.
Pelosi and Schiff are both guilty as hell and have been criminal in their efforts. They have lied and deceived the American public, and the media is still doing that. These are all treasonous and criminal acts. These are part of deception and lies and deceit and criminality at its highest level.
One by one. The shadow government is attempting to seize your destiny.
I have fallen victim to what you have chosen, what you have made of me.
Now let's go on here. This is over almost 2 hours long. We're not going to do 2 hours of this. So here's Glenn Beck, and he reports on this.
Simple aspect of this case. That phone call, that's it. That's all you're allowed to see. You cannot go opening any other doors or talk to any people that might confirm anything but the guilty verdict that they have already determined in secret. But facts and evidence are stubborn things, as John Adams said. They require an investigation and honesty, regardless of our personal wishes, inclinations, or passions. This is the most complex story I have ever presented to you. And I said that about, 2 months ago when I did the mega chalkboard. I'm going to ask a lot more of you than the Democrats will ever ask of you. I am going to ask you as an American something that no media will ever ask for you because they don't think you can handle it. But let me echo Schiff's quoting of Ben Franklin. To keep a republic requires exactly what I'm asking you to do tonight. The hard work of understanding history and context and of asking difficult questions. There's not going to be any Adam Schiff spoon feeding here. You're going to have to think tonight. You're going to have to listen, perhaps learn, and then read after. But isn't that who we aspire to be? We are going to do something that has not been done by us ever before, and that is, as I get into the facts, I am going to live tweet. We are going to serve out on social media every single document that proves the point we're going to make tonight. But that's what it's going to take to be a nation of people who think and work through tough issues, who don't just follow the literal mob. That's a nation that pursues the whole truth. And tonight is exactly how we keep a republic. But we have to start with history.
Now remember, Trump told us that he's a student of history. We have not studied history well, and we have not prepared for the great abuses that are upon us. Becks says we never seem to learn our lesson.
Who brought us into bed with the Saudis. We had to be friends with the Saudis. How much have we paid for that relationship? Was that a mistake or was that right? But if you look, example after example, Iraq. This is the Bay of Pigs. This was because of our fooling around and trying to nation build in Iran. This is the Benghazi attack. I mean, it's over and over and over again. We never seem to learn our lesson. Every time we meddle outside of our borders, it's the same thing, and it bites us squarely in the ass. And both parties say they're done with it. I mean, I think this is what this election was all about. This guy, people were saying, you know what, I don't want to be the world's policeman anymore. This guy said, I'm going to get us out. But did he? People who say, I don't want to meddle in other people's business. Those cries just seem to bounce off thick walls of Americans' monolithic deep state. Oh, and there is one. And if you thought hope and change was going to alter this, no, it's not going to. The U.S. meddling in other countries. If you think that's over, I'm going to show you some things tonight in their own words, with their own documents, that will beg to differ. But you really have to ask yourself, is this what you want? Should we be fomenting revolution around the world? Should we be starting revolutions in foreign lands, influencing the elections, and then partnering with NGOs to create this shadow government? And partner with these NGOs that don't have anything to do with you, that will met out justice, and then also pick the candidates for the countries. Did we pick these guys, or did the people of Ukraine pick these guys? That, I guess, is what we have to decide, isn't it? All of this is being done in your name. It's being done with your money. And I don't think most people even know it, let alone.
Again, this is abuse of money, abuse of power, abuse of taxes and legalities. This is worldwide control and manipulation. They talk about getting into our face and getting into our elections. Who are we to get into other people's elections and other people's stuff? And yeah, I think we should encourage the world to be more democratic, more republic, especially, more like our Constitution. I think that's one of the greatest messages we've ever had. But we shouldn't be paying off elections and people through money and tax money to throw elections, buy leaders, and do other criminal acts. Yes, criminal acts that are illegal. Yet it's going on behind our backs, behind the media, behind this hydra, this deep state, this dark state. Now, I don't know much about this Fabian Society, but I can guarantee you they aren't worth a damn as far as doing any good for our country.
No, checkers is just about making the next move and to jump. But you know, chess, that requires strategy. If you play chess like checkers, you're going to lose. Presidential elections are all about focusing on that next move. But if you really want to accomplish something real, systematic change, well, that requires strategy. Now, you may have heard me in the past, a couple thousand times, talk about a group called the Fabian Society. It was created when London looked like this in 1884. And it took its name from a Roman general named Fabius. His Latin nickname means delayer. Well, that doesn't sound very good. Delayer? I don't want to be... Well, he was fighting Hannibal. Remember the one with the elephants? This powerful army came across the mountains, and Fabius avoided major head-on battles. Instead, he used smaller strategic skirmishes, and his patience led to attrition, and it wore down Hannibal. This is the Fabian Society. This is one of their booklets from around the turn of the century after they first started. Socialism and intellectuals. All intellectuals love Fabian socialism. In their very first pamphlet.
This is what's wrong with our educational system. This socialism and this Fabianism in our colleges is an act of treason, in my opinion, and our government is funding it. Pell Grants, to other monies, they're funding it. They know if they can control the youth, they're going to control future generations. They're going to control outcomes. Again, this is part of strategy.
They declared, for the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal. Though many censured his delays, but when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless. Has anybody thought the socialists are starting to hit hard?
If they're not hitting hard, what is the youth wanting to gain to socialism? What is the political leaders that are wanting to gain socialism? The socialistic stuff has been hitting over 100 years in this nation, and now they're hitting hard. It is scary to think of what is coming in that area.
Fabian society, a socialist society's symbols is this. It's a tortoise, and you know the story of the tortoise and the hare. It represents their overall strategy in converting a government to socialism incrementally over time, rather than just trying to do it through a violent revolution. The motto that always went with the Fabian tortoise said, "When I strike hard." The Fabian Society, their coat of arms is this. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, which represented the Fabian Society's method. I mean, gotta hand it to them. At least they're being honest about their deception, I guess. We've talked about this several times. This is the Fabian Socialist window. It's a stained glass window. The Fabian window designed by an early Fabian member that everybody loves. Oh my gosh, George Bernard Shaw. He's a playwright. He's a genius. He's won all kinds of awards. We should celebrate him and do all of his plays. The guy was a monster. This is one of his first books, Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism by George Bernard Shaw. He was a Fabian socialist. He is also the guy who came up with the idea of maybe we can make some kind of a chamber and fill it with gas. That's George Bernard Shaw. So,
wow, never knew. George Bernard Shaw, a real monster. Thank you, Glenn Beck. Well, you've got to be kidding me.
Starring role, building the new world. This is him hammering the world. See the guy with the bellows. They're heating the globe as if it's a piece of hot red steel. Then they hammer it into the shape they want. On the shield above the world, they have the wolf in sheep's clothing. The message across the top of the window says this: pray devoutly, hammer stoutly, and remold it nearer to the heart's desire. Well, that says it all, doesn't it? And pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. The Fabians were all about the concept of gradualism. And the crazy thing is, it's working. The Fabian Society founded Britain's Labour Party in 1900. It's Britain's Labour Party that they started, and it's still going strong today. In 1951, the Fabians took their vision global, creating a couple of things. The Socialist International Organization, still very active today. Their goal of Socialist International was to be a central coordinator for the worldwide socialist movement. It seeks to establish a world government and views the UN as the ideal way to accomplish this goal.
The UN as an ideal way to accomplish this goal. This is why I've said the UN is a treasonous, traitorous organization, anti-American in its foundations, and totally socialistic and communistic in its ideals. Thank you for verifying that again, Beck. Glenn Beck.
When they had their Oslo conference, here they are, originally. When they had their Oslo conference, though, in 1962, they said, the ultimate objective of the parties of Socialist International is nothing less than world government. As a first step towards it, then we seek to strengthen the United Nations so it may become more and more effective. Even today, Socialist International is committed to a new democratic order. In their Declaration of Principles, they state, the international challenge is nothing less than the beginning of a new democratic world society. We can't allow blocs, nations, and private corporations to shape the political structure of the planet as a mere byproduct of their own self-interest. Strengthening the United Nations is the important step in the creation of this new democratic world society. By the way, to give you some idea where the American socialists are headed, in 2017, the Democratic Socialists of America voted to withdraw from the International Socialist Union because they said these guys aren't left enough. Feels too many Socialist International member parties in other countries just aren't doing enough to bring that one world government into play. Now, these are the people today, of course, that we know. But there's lots of groups. Today's Fabian Society gets significant funding from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. FEPS is the think tank wing of the Party of European Socialists. The PES is the association that all of the members of the socialist parties in the EU nations are part of. It's all part of an umbrella political party that campaigns to get socialists elected to the European Parliament. Naturally, all these European socialist parties are also members of the Socialists International. Another vital way Fabian socialists achieve gradualism, well, created university, especially really prestigious ones. In fact, this guy in 1894, George Bernard Shaw, and 3 other prominent Fabians decided to use the 20,000-pound gift the society gave him, and they created the London School of Economics. Today, The Guardian describes the school as political clout, as being closely wired to Parliament, Whitehall, and the Bank of England, which is precisely what the Fabians set out to do. In 2006, it was a perfect moment illustrating the slow and steady success of the Fabian Socialist project when the original Fabian window was reinstalled in the London School of Economics. Who had their picture taken in front of it? Who spoke at the unveiling ceremony? Labour Party and Fabian Socialist Minister Tony Blair. By the way, this is the graduating class of the London School of Economics in 1954. In that you'll find this young, handsome man. George Soros graduated in 54 with a philosophy and economics degree. I'm not exactly sure what kind of philosophy they teach there, but I could guess. All right, let's go back to
Soros graduated from that. Soros was graduated from that in 54. He got into the German army, was an SS officer, and now he's made the money that he's needed to influence so many political decisions in the United States and in the world. Scary. Ridiculous and scary. All right. Glenn Beck says it again. Uses money as a weapon.
Really
They
evil
sure
wife
are.
who was actually president for a while, but that's a different story. Here he is over here with the president. Now, House was the president's closest advisor. Wilson and House's partnership was a little shady because House wasn't a member of Wilson's cabinet. He had no official position at all, and yet he lived at the White House. In 1917, House put Lippmann in charge of a secret panel. It was a presidential top-secret research group. Here they are. It's called the Inquiry, which made up pretty much almost the entirety of the Ivy League academics. And Lippmann recruited most of the advisors and...
Wow, Ivy League academics. No wonder they're as liberal and radical as they are. Thank you, Glenn
And the
Beck.
Inquiry met in secret to design America's post-World War I plans for the world. While the Inquiry was hard at work, Wilson wrote this to House, quote, "When the war is over, we can force them," meaning the European allies, "to our way of thinking, because by that time they will, among other things, be financially in our hands." Holy cow, that sounds pretty evil. In December 1917, the Inquiry sent Wilson a report which detailed how the U.S. could use money as a weapon for a diplomatic offensive to manipulate Europe.
Wilson was a snake if there ever was, and he was elected, and he abused this nation and Europe, and got us into the Second World War because of his abuses after the First World War. Wilson was a real traitor.
When the war was finally over. In January 1918, Wilson worked in a room alone with Colonel House, and together they worked directly from the Inquiry's report to type this out. This is Woodrow Wilson's famous 14 points. This could be considered the birth of the deep state. Wilson's 14 points, of course, helped create something else. This is an original letter from Woodrow Wilson talking about the League of Nations and how it is the only thing that will save the world, and Europe must.
And the League of Nations, guess what? It becomes the United Nations.
Follow along. The League of Nations, in particular, this, the 14th point, called for something like it. It was the world's first major attempt at a structure for world government. Well, Wilson took several members of the Inquiry with him to France for the Paris Peace Conference. Here they are in Paris, France, and here is the Paris Peace Conference. Now, Lippmann, as part of the delegation, when the conference was over, the Inquiry members returned to the U.S. and created this. Oh, here's where it gets conspiratorial. The Council on Foreign Relations.
Wow. Anybody knows about the Council of Foreign Relations, knows about World War government, knows about the abuses of monetary systems, knows about the political abuses, and the forming of the deep state. Knows that Obama's wife, the man, Michelle, is part of that.
It would be an organization of American diplomats and other government officials. Here they are. Here are the government diplomats. Here's some other officials. Here's some bankers, some high-level journalists. A ton of academics were there. I mean, it was all of it. It was supposed to be nonpartisan, of course. The stated aim of the CFR would be to develop and influence government policy. So it was outside of the government. In other words, just to continue doing the work that was set out by the inquiry. The official history of the Council of Foreign Relations is even called Continuing the Inquiry. Conspiracies. All right, over time, the CFR would prove to be the perfect marriage between academia and the media to affect government policy. So now, let's fast forward 20 years. It's 1939. America's about to go to war again, mainly because of all of the things that Wilson did after World War I.
Another great truth. You heard it from Glenn Beck. You're not going to hear this from the media. But Wilson, because of the abusive things that he did and the financial pressures they put on Europe, got Europe through Germany into World War II again. The inflation they caused, the abuses they've caused World War II to come about.
But this time FDR is president, and he's a Wilson admirer, the most socialist-leaning president in American history so far. And shortly after World War II broke out in 1939, the Rockefellers decided to fund a 5-year top-secret Council on Foreign Relations project called the War and Peace Studies. Now, at that time, the State Department was still relatively small, and with a war on the horizon for the U.S., the Council on Foreign Relations saw a golden opportunity. The CFR proposed that this top-secret research project would shape American foreign policy, just like the inquiry had done under Wilson. So over the next 5 years of the project, the War and Peace Studies Group produced 682 memos for the State Department. All of them were marked classified at the time. The State Department marked all of the documents classified. Neither party wanted it to be known that the State Department was collaborating with some outside group. All right. 2 years after the top-secret War and Peace Studies project began, the U.S. government formed another tight partnership with people from the outside. FDR wanted an organization that would campaign against isolationism that was dominant across the country at the time. And isolationism, was it isolationism as we think, or is it just like, can we stay out of everybody else's business? This was months before Pearl Harbor. So he needed help shaping public opinion in support of the war, just in case. Well, his wife was helped. Eleanor Roosevelt, she was named honorary co-chair of the new organization called Freedom House. Whoa, who doesn't love that? It's like the Patriot Act, except in a house. It was funded by the U.S. government, yet somehow classified as a non-government organization. How's that possible? This is just the first instance of an NGO getting U.S. funds, your tax dollars, doing the will of the State Department without you knowing about it. And it wouldn't be the last time. The first 2 years of World War II were, let's just say, very busy for FDR and the State Department, since the League of Nations had obviously failed its primary mission. And it looks like our meddling led to another war. The State Department started working on a plan for a New World Organization in 1931. FDR even sketched out the UN structure while he was meeting in Tehran. That conference happened in 1943. And the Council on Foreign Relations, those members, well, they worked on a top-secret War and Peace Studies project. And they also attended the Dumbarton Oaks Conference in 1944, where the United Nations was designed. Oh, it was great. I think this is them in 1944 here. When the UN officially began a year later, one of the leaders in designing the UN Security Council was this guy. He's a Norwegian socialist. His name is Trygve Lie. I don't know. What do I look Scandinavian? He was also elected as the UN's first general secretary. Oh, wow. A socialist. Score another win for the Fabians' gradualism strategy.
So obviously, the UN had, stuck around, and it's been here long enough to become bloated, corrupt, and ineffective, just like all big governments throughout the world's history. Big surprise, it's been very bad at preventing wars. Progressives, regardless of nationality, they don't really understand this about human nature. You can't legislate wars from happening. It also turns out that people aren't really interested in a world that is run by one world government. One size does not fit all. Individual peoples like their independence. So, the European Union. What are we going to do? How did that happen? Well, the European Union was, let's take it down a notch. Before we fold everybody into the UN, because nobody wants to be ruled by somebody, on the other side of the sea. So the European Union slowly formed after the end of World War II. Again, just trying to be a buffer against the extremist nationalism that wrecked their countries and their continent through two major wars. This is when Paul-Henri Spaak, he is a Belgian who was the driving force behind the formation of the European Union. He was, believe it or not, oh my gosh, here he is, as a member of the Socialist Belgian Labour Party. Sensing another trend here? Socialists and progressives love the idea of centralized controlling bodies to run everything through their hand-picked experts. And they don't like it when people try to wiggle out from under their control. Oh no, no. Just look at the Brexit chaos in England. But back in 1947, deep state had been burrowing in for over 3 decades. It was developing its own culture and agenda. And that meant that the State Department wasn't necessarily in step with every president. For example, President Truman, he recognized the new state of Israel in 1948 against the State Department's wishes. In fact, they told him, you're not going to do it. Harry, don't do it or we'll destroy you. Oh, that sounds familiar. The State Department preferred a United Nations trusteeship, which would create a Jewish and Arab province in Palestine, but no official states. Well, with the exception of Israel, here he is with the Israel celebration. With the exception of this, everything became about nation building in the State Department and using the UN as much as possible for international cover and using at the time communist containment as justification at home. Americans have always been isolationists, but not in the bad way. We don't want to be the world's policemen. We've had that tendency since we came here, unless we're deliberately attacked. But for the next 70 years, our government rarely reflected the will of its own people in foreign affairs. They just kept doing it. We tried to nation build in Korea under Eisenhower. Here's Cuba and Vietnam under Kennedy. Here's that one. How about these two? I love these two. How about Vietnam and the Dominican Republic? Johnson, that was another one we were going to solve. Or here's Nixon, Vietnam, Cambodia, and here he is, nation building in Laos. Then with the president, President Reagan, Grenada, and Nicaragua. Have any of these worked out for us? I just want to ask. Then Panama under Bush. And then there was Somalia, and then Haiti, and Bosnia, and Serbia under Clinton. There we go. Here's Haiti. Ooh, here we are in Bosnia. I remember that worked out really well. Here he is in Serbia. And then we got to George W. Bush in Afghanistan. How's that working out? And then George W. Bush and Obama with Egypt. That didn't work out, did it? How come all these presidents are doing the same thing? It's not working out, ever. Ever. It's not working out. How come we're doing the same thing? Why doesn't this ever change? You don't have any new ideas?
Oh, I'll show you in a minute. Oh, we have new ideas. You're going to love them. Let me take you to 1983. The U.S. government formed a new organization that would be like Freedom House, except on steroids. They called it NED. Who doesn't love NED? The National Endowment for Democracy. Again, funded by the U.S. government and even subject to congressional oversight. Yet it still insists on calling a NGO for some reason. Don't ask me how that works. But NED acts as a grant-making foundation, giving your dollars to private groups in other countries with the purpose of promoting democracy in those countries. NED's board of directors, they are great people. There's Carl Gershman as president. Now, who's Carl Gershman? Don't worry, he's just the former executive director of the Social Democrats USA. Yeah, the other main socialist part in the U.S. is Gershman. He's still the president of NED today. For the deep state to survive, longevity and tenure is key. So when they created NED, it was approved by Congress, and one of its...
Why in the hell does Congress approve this stuff? Why do they have blackmail on all these people? Why do they get these votes? Why do they get our money? This is total crap.
Founding purposes was this: promoting non-governmental participation in democratic training programs and strengthening democratic electoral processes abroad in cooperation with indigenous democratic forces. Wow, that sounds like a fancy way of saying, I don't know, revolution and election interference. But it goes on. When Congress reauthorized NED a few years later, there was additional mandates. And it's this one, that NED consult with the State Department on any overseas programs it funds prior to the commencement of their activities. Wow. So if you're tracking with me, the National Endowment for Democracy, supposedly an NGO, even though it's fully funded by you, coordinates with the State Department before it starts any of its overseas activities. Perfect. Let me show you some. By 2008, our nation building was not working, especially when it came to Afghanistan and Iraq. That's when we got our first community organizer-in-chief. President Barack Obama. Oh my gosh. Now Barry, later known as Barack, he rose through the political ranks in the same wolf in sheep's clothing mold of the Fabians. Distract and dazzle with hope while delivering tons of change. Oh, he was all over. Overseas, we obviously needed a change of strategy because it wasn't working. Here, the panel's report assails the CIA for failure on Iraq weapons, the 7 deadly sins of failure in Iraq, and of course, we all know that picture. The CIA and military ops weren't cutting it anymore. We'd have to tailor our nation building, country by country. How are we going to do that? Well, welcome to the age of irresponsibility. Because the deep state didn't stop its efforts altogether. No. They just farmed them out. They found a better way. That way they don't have to be responsible. The military would pull back, and we'd use a private military company like Blackwater. State Department pulls out, and we'll use those NGOs. CIA pulls back, and, well, we have Google and Twitter and Facebook. They're doing all the community organizing on a global scale, and we can't control them. Or can we? You see, the tools have changed, but you still heat the world and remold it nearer to the heart's desire. One of the main architects of this 21st century strategy was in the Obama White House, and we talked about her an awful lot at the time. Her name is Samantha Power. And her doctrine was really known as the responsibility to protect. I explained it 8 years ago on Fox. Why don't you get together with my charity group? So she did. And then they spawned, you ready? The Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect, which gives us the responsibility to protect doctrine, which sends us into Libya. Isn't that weird? By the way, Open Society, only one of two of the foundations that bankroll this whole idea. So, it was her idea that George Soros creates a foundation that gets this whole responsibility to protect thing through. The very same doctrine that was used because she has his ear. I wonder who has his other ear. Uh-oh, I remember now, her husband. So the U.S. military action in Libya is based on this. And this is these are all the very diverse people that got together to say, back fall, hey, by the way, we should do something about democracy in Egypt. Did that work out for us? Libya? Deep state is not a conspiracy theory. This is a long tale, okay? And they're not meeting like Spectre in some little secret society room. But it is an ingrained culture of unelected officials who have their plans set and they work to fulfill their goals, regardless who the president is.
Again, this is inspired by Satan to control, destroy, and manipulate the will of people. Period. I'm going to end it here. It's about 47 minutes long. You can watch the other hour of this on going back. It's well worth your time. Well worth your time. Let's go in here. Because the State Department needs to be Soros. A lot of these things need to be controlled. Need to be eliminated. And that's why they didn't want Trump in here. Did not want him in there. And this is all coming out with Ukraine. This is why they didn't want him over there.
You to continue, you might want to declassify Directive number 11. If you want to see how deep the Ukrainian rabbit hole really goes, declassify Presidential Study Directive 11. You are the only person, sir, that has the power to do it. I have a feeling that the strategy they used to take over Ukraine and other places might be described in this presidential directive. Everything that was happening in Ukraine was being done during the Arab Spring. Civil Society 2.0 had been on the ground a full year before the Arab Spring kicked off. And what did they call that again? They said it was a spontaneous revolution. U.S. dollars then began to flow to the protesters on the street. They did this through funding from the Freedom House and National Endowment for Democracy. What a coincidence. Remember, the State Department had that meeting in 2008, a few months after Obama was elected. Yeah, you know who's there? The Egyptian activists that brought down their countries. Yeah, they were at that conference. They were, quote, taught to use social networking and mobile technologies to promote democracy. This is a leaked State Department diplomatic cable where they confirmed the participation of the Egyptian activists in the 2008 meeting in New York. It's now going out online. It also reveals that the U.S. Embassy is still going on as we speak in all of Europe. They had the lowest flat tax on the continent. They had close ties with Israel. They were strongly pro-life. They also had recently built a border fence to try to deal with their immigration crisis. The State Department was attacking this government and going through George Soros with your money. It was so bad that it prompted Mike Lee to write an official letter to the ambassador asking, "What the heck are you doing?" This wasn't the official policy of the government. No, this is the institutionalized policy of the shadow government. And as it happened, time and time again since all of this began, violence, riots, chaos were the consequences of that shadow policy. By the way, I talked to Mike Lee about this. The U.S. ambassador remained in Macedonia until a few months ago. There was never any explanation as to why he left. There was no entry on the official embassy website. He just suddenly wasn't there anymore. When I talked to Mike Lee before this broadcast, he told me that he had received what the State Department might classify as answers, but Mike said his questions were never answered to satisfactory conditions. Spontaneous, indigenous, popular uprisings. Check the newspaper today, if any newspaper is still in print. They're breaking out. And the fingerprints of civil society 2.0 and George Soros is all over them. They're following their 4-point plan country by country. I challenge you, everywhere violence is erupting, try to find one that isn't related to these programs, the groups, the people that I've shown you tonight. Let me give you one. The violence in Chile. It continues to boil over. Chile is one country in South America that actually has seen economic growth by adhering to open and free markets. It's now spiraling out of control. More than 15 people have died in this revolution. And you know what sparked the chaos? It wasn't somebody setting themselves on fire, no. Civil society groups hit the streets in Chile due to a 3-cent cost in public transportation. An increase of 3 pennies? Really? Chile's free market government has been a target of Hydra for a very long time. But Civil Society 2.0 began setting up their TAC camps in Chile November 2010. From the press release, quote, goals of the program include increasing regional civil society organizations, digital literacy, sharing information, building networks, and matchmaking like-minded individuals to organizations. Is anyone doing this that's actually pro-freedom? We are way behind, guys. It always reads the same, and regime change and chaos in the street always follow. And those like-minded organizations and individuals included people like this woman. Her name is Javiera Lopez. She's one of the lead organizers out in the streets. She's also the national political counselor for a far-left social political party, socialist, called Democratic Revolution. Their top demands, as seen in this tweet, is to force the rewriting of the Constitution. Gee, where have we heard that before? The State Department, Soros, Hydra, that is called Civil Society 2.0. A year after Civil Society 2.0 began training activists in Chile, Democratic Revolution formed to organize the, quote, activities of the student movement. Today, they're leading the charge in the same way Egyptian activists overthrew the Mubarak regime. But none of it would have been possible without the financing of George Soros and his Open Society Foundation. And your money. Billions of dollars of your money. Soros was there from the beginning and continued funding through at least 2015. Now they're poised to overthrow one of the freest market economies in South America. And they're taking down country after country after country, one at a time. The strategies of progressive leaders in the past of establishing large governing bodies such as the League of Nations or the UN or bending continents under their ideological boots is largely over. Why start from the top when you can conquer fragile regimes one by one? And if you happen to think this really doesn't affect you because it's only happening beyond our borders, I've got some really bad news for you. Countries like Ukraine, Macedonia, Egypt, Yemen, and Chile are much easier to heat up, destabilize, and then cast in your image that you want. You can place allies in the criminal justice system. You can do deals with their leaders to fast-track legislation. You can't really do that here. Or can you? Is it a coincidence that leftists are being trained here in the U.S. by Soros groups? Is it a coincidence that our DOJ, FBI, CIA, all of this has been so badly damaged in reputation, and corruption is at such high levels? I've never seen this before in my country. And our Constitution is constantly discredited and undermined, and no one really even is taught it anymore. How far-fetched is it to believe that in the next 5 years you could get America to call for an anti-corruption bureau because it has to stop? Some outside force that would come in and rat out corruption. How hard is it believed that protesters and leaderless organizations could rise up to create instability and demand a few changes be made to our Constitution? It's been a long night. You have a lot to think about, and you have a lot of homework to do. But I beg you to do it. This has to be exposed because, make no mistake, it is happening here in the United States. They are skipping for now the federal government and going state by state, county by county, city by city. The same tactics they've been employing all over the world have come and are coming to Main Street, USA. We are currently in touch with several...
Now I want to end this. His last warning is most critical because city by city, state by state, county by state, county, they're coming for us. And they're going to try to get people to rise up and start rebellion and go against these elites when actually they're using us for civil unrest and destruction. We must be united under the Constitution of the United States and under the Founding Father principles. And anything which is influencing our government outside of these principles is unconstitutional and is treasonous. Treasonous in its highest form. I'm telling you that this stuff is treason in its highest form and will destroy this country if we are not diligent through White House, through justice systems, through judicial system, because it's unconstitutional and treasonous. Of this I testify in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Watch Glenn Beck's full movie. Well worth its time. 668,000 views. This is what's coming. This is true journalism. This is true history. This is destruction from without by our government, from sources without our government, from within. If you understand this, you know that this is absolutely what we've been doing for over 70 years, and it will destroy this country and the world if it continues. Only the Constitution and the Founding Father principles are what we uphold to. Anything outside this government or in this government which does not support these things is treasonous in its highest form. I again say, beware, ignorant. Don't be ignorant, be diligent. We will be victorious, but we will have to give it battle like never before. All this stuff is coming out, and this is why they fought an outsider, Trump. Both parties fought him hard in his 2016 election. Understand what's going on and understand why they want to illegally impeach him and destroy him, because the deep state is being peeled back and looked at like never before, and they don't want want it exposed. In Jesus Christ's name, again, amen. Be faithful, be diligent, and note this battle will not end till Christ consumes all these snakes. Satan is bound, and we have true freedom through Jesus Christ. Again, I testify these things in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen.